Soft synthetic piano music started playing as Laura slept. Small, high-pitched notes reverberated, almost creating bubbles of electronic sound. The crystal-clear sound emanating from the alarm she had set up the night prior began to stir her from her slumber. Then, with a deafening cacophony, a loud siren erupted, changing the overall feel of the song. Meow. As the siren wound down, the electronic notes came back, followed by some drums. Finally, a voice could be discerned behind all the heavy instruments. Geschaut wierd. Wishamsen Kent. Heavy and coarse, the voice sang the lyrics harshly with little to no emotion. Laura's eyes opened begrudgingly, wishing she had gotten a bit more rest. The song continued on regardless of Laura's wishes. From warrior das die Hautfrem Brent. A little bit more life in the lyrics could be heard, slightly more on the side of anger or frustration. She moved her head, flexing her neck gently, and pushed herself upright. Ik weer fin liegt. A yawn escaped her as she adjusted herself to a sitting position. She rotated her head clockwise, the same with both of her wrists. The tendons and joints stretched, making small, audible pops. In mein Geschicht. Mein halber Schrei. Chills made their way down Laura's spine in the form of a shiver, a frisson, as the all-too-familiar lyrics made themselves heard, dredging up powerful emotions. Freier, frei! The song erupted into a loud mix of drums, guitar, and electronic piano. The initial loud siren also made its return, although not drowning out every other instrument this time. Bang, bang! She waited for the refrain to kick in before shutting off the alarm. Fully woken up now, she started her morning routine. Fetching her bag, she opened it and took out a toothbrush. Using a refillable bottle of water, she dipped it in and applied a small dot-sized amount of toothpaste, brushing her teeth. Rinsing it out, she then grabbed one of the remaining 4 protein bars that she had left from Earth. She told herself to remember to grab extra provisions to keep in her room. If Jean-Francois's cooking venture held any promise, she'd likely try to copy that. Chewing on the protein bar, she changed her clothes and readied herself for class, having taken a bath the night before. At least most aliens had heard of hygiene, she thought, having been pleased at finding a bath-like structure attached to her room. She made her way towards class with 10 minutes to spare, and was delighted at finding 4 human-sized seats. Looking over her laptop, this class was supposed to delve into diplomacy, and was taught by a teacher they hadn't had yet, Mrs. Maldron. A few students walked past her and took their seats, mostly ignoring her. She wished she could be slightly more social, better able to interact with the other species, but she was shy. Perhaps awkward was a better word than shy. She did have friends after all. But how to approach a completely foreign species? What did they have in common? Did they even have small talk? Class started to fill up slowly but surely as she pondered those questions in her head, chin resting inside her palm. A hand touched her shoulder, and she looked up to see Izumi. Ah, good morning, announced Laura. Good morning as well, replied Izumi. Sleep well? As much as one can be expected. I think I had a few bruises from the stillsuit exercise we did, however. Laura looked at her hands. A few bruises present in the palm of her hands from gripping the controls tightly. Izumi nodded in agreement. I was only watching up from above, but I expected it must have been rough. Moving fast and suddenly like you did. I wonder how the boys fared. As if on cue, Barry and Jean-Francois entered the classroom, amongst the last group of students to do so, taking their place behind the girls. Speak of the devil, it looks like they also look worse for wear, remarked Laura. Isn't it warm? Why is Barry wearing a long-sleeved shirt with a hood? Asked Izumi questioningly, which made Laura notice how Barry had a few bruises and scratches on his face. It appeared that the stillsuit match had left its mark on the boys as well. Laura did a double take when she looked at Barry's hoodie more closely. She blinked twice to try and tell herself that she had not seen correctly, but the image stayed the same. She facepalmed and muttered something to herself about stupid Americans. I know the aliens can't read it, but why did this idiot bring a hoodie with thick thighs saves lives on a goddamn space voyage? The students stopped talking as the teacher closed the door, signaling that class would be beginning soon. Mrs. Maldron bent her tentacles together, like someone interlacing their fingers. Hello, class. I see some new faces in the room. Excellent. I've been anxiously and nervously expecting you. Let me introduce myself to those who are new. I am Mrs. Muldrin, and I teach natural sciences and diplomacy. As a matter of fact, just a few days ago, we had a biology class where you were our main subject matter. The human students were a bit surprised at this. Laura lifted a hand to ask a question. Mrs. Muldrin pointed at her with one of her 8 tentacles. What did you mean by that? Well, you were a newly discovered species, the first one in nearly 400 years. Everyone was quite curious about you. It was important to try and glean some details of what your species is like, for how we interact with you. We had some basic information provided by your internet, but much of it was unreliable and without sources. One of the students lifted her appendage, wishing to speak. Once granted, she quickly uttered, "It's been exactly 362 years since our first contact encounter." Thank you, Zargwil. I must say I am disappointed that Mr. Florge broached the subject matter of your history first, and in the manner that he did. However, we can now do it the right way, examining what we have in common, instead of what makes humans different. How can we do that? Asked Jean-Francois. Perhaps you four could clarify a few things for us. I browsed your internet briefly, trying to find pertinent information, but many articles seem to contradict each other, so I only used those that seem to be the most reliable in the previous class. Mrs. Muldrin paused a moment before resuming. I had initially thought to simply make your internet available to all students, but some of the contents were of a rather distasteful nature. So much so that I had to report it to the Education Board, and they have since moved it under a level 3 quarantine. She shivered momentarily, after remembering her experiences. What's a level 3 quarantine? Barry asked, quite curious. It's to prevent someone coming across it by accident. A level 3 quarantine necessitates a special permit, which can be granted after passing a written test, in order to make sure the material will not traumatize the reader. Man, I always knew the internet was a toxic cesspool of depravity, but it never dawned on me that it would be regarded as that bad. Barry laughed as he said it. Ismi seemed to take this not quite as well as the others. I hope they won't judge us too harshly for this. Mrs. Muldrin became apologetic. No, judgment has not been done. It's simply that we surprised your species with a visit, and they welcomed us immediately with open arms, helping the wounded from the accidental crash on their planet. First contact with other species usually takes much longer, giving them the time to cleanse away all documents that shine a bad light on them, before sharing their information databases with us. Today's class was supposed to be about history, one of the subjects under the umbrella of diplomacy. It is important to know the history of a species in order to know how to conduct good diplomacy. It also helps in better understanding the culture and personality of the species. I think just about everyone would like to know more about the humans, if I'm not mistaken. The class voiced their agreement. That might be a bit hard to do. Humans aren't united like many of you seem to be. We're still divided across many states that each have their own culture, Laura stated. That is understandable. We're looking for shared human traits and preferences that can apply to all humans. What about governing systems? Divided there too. A large amount of us have democracies, a few use oligarchies, others communism, and even fewer have monarchies. Jean-Francois shrugged as he said so. Very interesting. We also vary by species. Mine also uses an oligarchy, but we have our fair share of monarchies and technocracies across the spectrum of the other species. Mrs. Muldrin smiled as she recanted. What kind of government do you have for your own tribes? Asked one of the students. We're all under democracies, although Barry's country could almost be considered an oligarchy, Laura said deadpan. Barry's obvious facial disagreement spoke volumes. So, anyone at all can become your leader? Continued the student who had asked the question. Well, yes, but no. No one's ever won without being part of one of the main parties. You need money to run a campaign, connections to get your name known, and etc., replied Barry, trying to save face for his country. The class was silent for a moment, until another student asked a question. Do humans have any sort of rituals? For example, before sleeping, my species always offers a prayer to the creators. Well, most would be religious in nature, I think, like praying or baptism, right guys? Barry looked to the others for advice. At the mention of religion, the alien female appeared to have a shocked reaction, but it quickly changed into one of excited joy. Ah, there we go. The Luminal also have a belief system in the supernatural, believing that a precursor species has seeded all known life in the universe. So far, they were the only ones with such a trait. Their teacher seemed pleased to find some common ground, however archaic it was. Oh, I can't wait to tell my people about you. We'll be making a pilgrimage to your homeworld as soon as possible. We've not had others to speak of theology with for eons. Oh no, what have we done? Are we responsible for the religious wars that may follow? Laura's heart sank to her stomach, and she felt sick to her core. This was like when the Catholics discovered the New World, except space Jehovah's Witnesses would find Earth. Well, aside from that, cultural rituals exist, I suppose. Things like handshaking or birthdays. Maybe bowing instead of handshaking in some countries, added Jean-Francois, trying to steer the conversation away from religion. Taking shoes off before entering a house, funerals, eating together, dating. We've got many rituals when you think about it, added Izumi, piggybacking on Jean-Francois' train of thought. What do you mean by ceremony for the dead? Asked Mrs. Morgan with a genuine touch of confusion. Funeral? Well, you know, burial, cremation, those types of things. What do you do when someone dies? Questioned Jean-Francois. We process the body, of course. It's the most efficient thing to do, said Mrs. Morgan without an ounce of warmth. Wait, what do you mean process? Barry's eyebrows raised as he asked the question. We use it as protein for carnivore species diets, of course. We've been eating people? Oh god, I think I'm going to be sick. Jean-Francois' face contorted, and he began taking fast, short breaths. Don't those species have farms for raising livestock? Laura seemed flabbergasted by the prospect of eating sapient creatures as well. Naturally, but we aren't always close to one of those worlds. We do synthesize the majority of the protein, but this helps us save some of that, stated Mrs. Morgan. Yep, that's going to be a note from me. Humans don't eat sapient species. Barry thought of dolphins and squids, remembering those are highly intelligent. The vast majority of us don't anyways. Barry looked at the class and saw Lasona, giving him a wink. Well, this has been quite informative, but we're going a bit off topic now. What about social dynamics? How are human communities and your relations with your progenitors? You know, once again, that's going to vary a lot. Some humans are very close to their parents, others break off as soon as they can. Initially, most couples that do have children do so willingly. It can happen accidentally, however, but sometimes they end up separating from each other due to different reasons. Where I'm from, the most common arrangement tends to be a male and a female with 2 children. As far as communities, you buy or rent a house from a neighbourhood you like or can afford, preferably not too far from work and other amenities. Barry had taken over from Jean-Francois' spot, as the latter had left the room quite urgently mere moments ago. The child stays with his parents for how long? Asked the luminal student. Izumi answered it. Traditionally, up to 18 years old or completion of secondary studies. Some may spend their entire lives in their parents' home, however. We call those hikakomori in my language. Students murmured amongst themselves, shocked at how long children stay with their parents. They spend nearly 20 years learning and under their parents' wing? It'll drive me mad. That probably explains why they only have 2 offspring if they stay for that long. Mrs. Mulder managed to bring back a relative calm, raising her tentacles and slowly bringing them down. You have strong family ties then, somewhat like the Noir, where offspring often follow their family for half of their life before making their own family. Laura addressed Mrs. Maldron. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think what you'll be looking for is more similar to etiquette? Ah, customary code of polite behaviour, that would do quite nicely. There is general human etiquette? It'll be a very small list, as many things change from one culture to the other. In general, don't be rude, don't stare. Provide assistance if it is required. It's polite to face the person you're talking to. Humans tend to enjoy some personal space when possible. It's considered rude to not offer a guest refreshments. Things like that, but honestly, seeing as you're aliens and not humans, I'm not sure how many of those we'd hold you accountable to. Laura shrugged her shoulders, not knowing how to solve the issue of dealing with humans. This may be more difficult than I had anticipated. Alright, let's take a small recess and reconvene in 72 minutes. Students stood up in order to leave the classroom, when without warning, an explosion knocked everyone down, the shockwave reverberating throughout the station. An alarm began shouting, and everyone panicked.